Dad, for God's sake, can't you even wash a dish properly? Marcus snatched the plate from Charles's trembling hands, waving it in the air like evidence of an unforgivable crime. Look at this. There's still grease here. And here. Charles, 70. Years old, hunched his shoulders, his back curved as if carrying not just the weight of years, but also the daily humiliation. I'm sorry, son. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Christine, Marcus's wife, rolled her eyes from the kitchen table where she was frantically typing on her laptop. It's always the same excuse. The eyes, the hands, the age, as if that justified incompetence. The comment hung in the air like poison. Charles felt the familiar knot in his throat, the one he had learned to silently swallow for the past 2 years, ever since Marcus and Christine had moved into his house temporarily after losing their apartment due to failed investments. Dad, we've talked about this. If you can't help with the chores, at least don't get in the way. Marcus put the plate back in the sink with unnecessary force. I think you'd better go to your room. We have an important video conference in 10 minutes. Once again, Charles was dismissed from the kitchen of his own home, from the space he himself had built with the sweat of 4 decades as an accountant. He nodded, moving slowly out of the room, aware of the impatient glances following him. And don't forget to close the door. Christine's voice reached him when he was already in the hallway. In the increasingly smaller refuge of his bedroom, Charles sat on the edge of the bed. The walls seemed closer with each passing day, just like the limits of his existence. The room that was once just a place to sleep had now become his undeclared prison. On top of the dresser, a photo of him with Helen, his late wife, smiled at him. Next to it, discreetly framed, was the document he had taken from the secret drawer of his desk the previous week, the deed to the house, exclusively in his name, as left by Helen in her will 5 years ago. Charles ran his fingers over the glass of the frame, feeling a determination growing inside him. That humiliation at breakfast had been no different from hundreds of others in recent months, but something had changed. Perhaps it was the way Marcus yanked the plate from his hands as if he were an incapable child. Or maybe Christine's disdainful comment about his incompetence. He picked up the phone and, with a firmness he hadn't felt in a long time, dialed a number he knew by heart. Mendez and Associates Law Office, good morning. Good morning. I'd like to speak with Dr. Richard Mendez, please. Who may I say is calling? Charles Ferreira, an old friend. While waiting, Charles looked again at Helen's photo. You were right, dear, he murmured. It's time to take back control. Charles, it's been too long, my friend. Richard's familiar voice brought a genuine smile to his face for the first time that day. Richard, I need your help. Can we meet today? Of course. Has something happened? Charles hesitated, looking at his closed bedroom door, thinking about the 2 years of gradual erasure, of small and large humiliations, of being relegated to the margins of his own life. Yes, he finally replied. I've decided I'm no longer going to be invisible in my own home. Richard Mendez hadn't changed much over the years, Charles thought as he watched his friend cross the cafe to meet him. At 68, he still maintained the upright posture and keen gaze that had made him one of the most respected lawyers in the city. Charles? Richard shook his hand firmly. You look tired. It's not physical fatigue, Charles replied as they sat down. It's something deeper. For the next hour, Charles unburdened himself. He told of Marcus and Christine's arrival, supposedly for a few weeks, which turned into 2 years. He described how gradually he lost space in his own home. First the living room, then the kitchen, then the office that Helen had decorated for him. He explained how he became the unpaid assistant, the occasional babysitter for his 10-year-old grandson, the available driver, the invisible cook, and most recently, the incompetent who got in the way more than he helped. Last night, Charles continued, I heard Christine talking on the phone with her sister. She said they were thinking of completely remodeling the house and that it would be better if I looked for a place more suitable for my age. Richard listened attentively, making occasional notes. And what do you want to do about it, Charles? Charles straightened his shoulders, feeling a determination he hadn't experienced in years. I want my house back. I want my life back. And I want my son to learn to support himself as a 42-year-old adult should. Richard smiled. Do you have all the documents? The deed, Helen's will, bank statements? I have everything stored in the bank vault. Marcus was present when the will was read, but I think he conveniently forgot that the house and all assets are exclusively in my name. And have you been paying all the bills? Every penny. Water, electricity, property tax, internet, groceries. Everything comes out of my pension and the savings that Helen and I built together. They tell their friends they're taking care of the old man, but in reality, I'm the one supporting 3 adults and a child. Richard closed his folder, a determined gleam in his eyes. Charles, you were one of the best accountants in this city for 40 years. It's time to use that methodical mind of yours to regain control. How? We'll develop a plan. Detailed, meticulous, foolproof. Like those financial reports you use to prepare for large companies. For the first time in a long while, Charles felt a wave of hope. And where do we start? With documentation. Tomorrow, I want you to bring all the papers. We'll review every detail. Then, we'll establish a timeline for your actions. This won't be a battle, Charles. It will be a strategic campaign. When Charles returned home that afternoon, he found Christine organizing a children's party for her son, Lucas. The living room was decorated with balloons and banners, and there was enough food to feed a small army. Where were you? Christine asked without raising her eyes from the glasses she was arranging. We needed help here. I went to visit an old friend, Charles replied, noticing how his favorite armchair had been pushed into a corner to make room for the decorations. You could have chosen another day. You know we've been organizing Lucas's party for weeks. Charles didn't remember being informed about any party, yet another decision made without consulting him in his own home. How many people are coming? He asked, keeping his tone neutral. Just 15 children and some parents. Nothing major. Christine finally looked at him. It would be good if you could stay in your room during the party. You know how noisy children can get, and we don't want you to get stressed. Translation: we don't want you embarrassing us by appearing at the party. Of course, Charles replied softly. I'll stay in my room. As he climbed the stairs to his increasingly smaller room, Charles felt a strange calmness. A few days ago, this request would have hurt like a stab wound. Today, it merely seemed to confirm the necessity of the plan that was beginning to take shape in his mind. In his room, he opened the secret drawer of the old dresser and took out his notebook, the very same one where, over the past few months, he had been methodically documenting each incident, each disdainful comment, each unauthorized change to his house. He added the day's entry, May 12th, not invited to my own grandson's birthday party in my own home. Next to the notebook, he carefully placed Richard's card. Tomorrow the real work would begin. This is absolutely shocking, Charles. Richard adjusted his glasses as he examined the bank statements and bills paid over the past 2 years. You not only paid all the house expenses, but also financed 3 vacation trips for them. Charles nodded, feeling a mixture of shame and anger. Helen and I always planned to use those savings to travel after retirement. We never got to make the European trip she dreamed of so much. Richard continued analyzing the documents. And what about the car? I bought it 3 years ago, shortly before Helen fell ill. It's in my name, but Marcus uses it as if it were his. He says he needs it for work. And his job? Supervisor at a logistics company. The salary isn't bad, but he and Christine have always lived beyond their means. That's why they lost their apartment. Late payments, accumulated debts. Richard made a few more notes and then looked directly at Charles. My friend, what they've done constitutes emotional and financial elder abuse. We could file a lawsuit if you wanted. Charles shook his head. I don't want to sue my own son, Richard. I just want my life back. I want respect. I understand. In that case, we need a different approach. Richard took a blank sheet. Let's outline a step-by-step plan. During the next 2 hours, they developed a detailed strategy. Charles would open a new bank account where Marcus would have no access. Gradually, he would transfer his savings there. Richard would prepare a formal notification establishing Charles as the sole owner of the house, with exclusive rights to decide on any modifications to the property. They would also contact a real estate agent to assess the current value of the house. "Why the assessment?" asked Charles. "Because knowing the true value of what we own gives us power, Charles. And if you decide to sell, you'll need to know exactly how much your property is worth in the current market." The idea of selling the house where he had lived with Helen for more than 30 years caused a tightness in Charles's chest. "I don't know if I could sell." "I'm not saying you should sell. I'm saying you should know your options." Richard paused. "Charles, have you ever thought about where you'd like to live if not in that house?" The question caught Charles by surprise. He had never seriously considered the possibility of living elsewhere. "There's a condominium for active seniors near the Central Park," Richard continued. "My cousin Elisa moved there last year and is loving it. Modern apartments, social activities, security, complete independence. Sounds expensive." "Less than your current house is worth on the market. Much less." On his way home, Charles took a detour. Instead of going straight, he drove to the Central Park and parked. From there, he could see the condominium Richard had mentioned, a modern 6-story building with spacious balconies and well-maintained green areas. He observed the residents, men and women his age, walking, talking in small groups, some practicing Tai Chi in the garden. They didn't look too old or incapable, as Marcus and Christine often made him feel. They looked alive. When Charles finally arrived home, he found Marcus and Christine on the living room sofa, watching a movie at extremely high volume. "Dad, where were you? We called several times." Charles realized he had left his cell phone on silent mode during the meeting with Richard. "I went to take care of some personal matters." "What matters?" asked Christine, frowning. "Personal," Charles repeated with a firmness that surprised even himself. The couple exchanged glances. "Dad." Marcus adjusted his tone to that fake concern that Charles knew so well. "Are you okay? Lately you've been going out alone without telling us." "Marcus, I'm 70 years old, not 7. I don't need to ask permission to go out." The silence that followed was almost palpable. It was the first time in many months that Charles had responded without apologizing, without yielding. "We're just concerned," Christine intervened with that condescending tone reserved for children and the elderly. "At your age, anything can happen." "At any age, anything can happen, Christine. The difference is that I have 7 decades of experience dealing with the unexpected." Without waiting for a response, Charles headed to his room, feeling the perplexed gazes burning into his back. Something had fundamentally changed within him. The submissive and invisible man who had inhabited that house for the past 2 years was beginning to awaken. In his room, Charles opened the laptop he had rarely used since Marcus and Christine had transformed the office into a home office space for her. Entering a search site, he typed, "Alameda Seniors Condominium, prices." The values that appeared made his eyes widen. With what his house was currently worth, he could buy one of the best apartments in the condominium outright and still have enough money left to live comfortably for many years. That night, for the first time since Marcus and Christine's arrival, Charles slept without taking the anxiety medication his doctor had prescribed. In his dreams, he saw Helen smiling at him, nodding in approval. A week later, Charles had meticulously executed the first phase of his plan. He opened a new account at a different bank, discreetly transferring part of his savings. He collected and organized all the important documents, deeds, insurance policies, investments, Helen's will, and kept copies in the safe at Richard's office. He also began documenting every change made to his house without his permission, taking photos, noting dates, recording conversations where he was treated with disrespect. It was the methodical accountant in action, building a solid case, not for a legal court, but for his own conscience. That Thursday morning, Charles was preparing his coffee when Marcus entered the kitchen, already dressed for work. "Dad, We need to talk about something important. Charles calmly poured coffee into his favorite cup, one of the few pieces from Helen's porcelain collection that hadn't yet been accidentally broken or stored in the basement. I'm listening. Christine and I are thinking of making some renovations to the house. What kind of renovations? Nothing too big, just modernizing a bit. The kitchen to start with. These cabinets are very old, and the layout isn't functional. Charles observed the kitchen that Helen had planned with such care, where every detail reflected her taste. And after the kitchen? Well, maybe the main bathroom, and we thought about knocking down the wall between the living room and the office to create an integrated space. The office where the last vestiges of Helen's presence remained. The desk she used to write letters, the bookcase, with her favorite books. I see. And who's going to pay for these renovations? The direct question seemed to disconcert Marcus. Well, it's an investment in the house. It increases the property value. That doesn't answer my question, son. Marcus shifted his weight from one foot to the other, visibly uncomfortable. We thought you could use part of your savings. After all, it's your house. Exactly. It is my house. Something in Charles's tone made Marcus look at him more carefully. What does that mean? It means that any renovation would need my approval, and I don't approve. Marcus blinked, surprised by the unexpected resistance. Dad, these changes are necessary. The house is outdated, and to be honest, at your age, you should consider a smaller place, easier to maintain, maybe a senior apartment. Like the Alameda condominium. Marcus seemed surprised that Charles knew the place. Well, yes. Something like that would be perfect for you. Safe, with people your age. Charles took a sip of his coffee, feeling a strange calmness. And you would continue here, in my outdated house? Temporarily, of course. Until we find our own place. Like the temporary 2 years before, thought Charles. Marcus, I think it's time we had a frank conversation about this house and about your financial contributions. Marcus's face paled slightly. What conversation? About the fact that you've been living here for 2 years without paying rent, bills, or food. About the fact that you use my car as if it were yours. About the fact that you've been making decisions about my property as if it were yours. Marcus looked genuinely shocked. But Dad, we take care of you. We provide company, security, help with the tasks you can no longer do on your own. What tasks exactly can't I do on my own, Marcus? Before you arrived, I cooked my own meals, cleaned my own house, tended my own garden. I drove my own car, paid my own bills, did my own shopping. But what if you fell, if you got sick? I have health insurance, a funeral plan, an updated will, and friends who regularly check on my well-being. I had all of that before you arrived, and I'll continue to have it after you leave. The word leave hung in the air like a threat. Are you kicking us out? Marcus's voice trembled slightly. Not yet. But it's time for you to understand that this is my house, not yours, and that any changes require my approval. At that moment, Christine entered the kitchen, obviously having heard part of the conversation. What's going on here? My father thinks we're taking advantage of him, Marcus replied, his voice mixing incredulity and indignation. I didn't say that, Charles calmly corrected. I said it's time we establish some clear boundaries. Christine crossed her arms, staring at Charles with that superior look he had learned to detest. What kind of boundaries? To start with, no renovations will be done to this house without my express approval. Second, starting next month, you will contribute financially to the expenses. Rent, bills, food. Rent? Christine almost shouted. In your own father's house, Marcus? My house, my rules, Charles replied simply. If you're not satisfied with the terms, you're free to look for another place to live. The shock on both their faces would be comical if it weren't so revealing. They truly believed they had the right to live at his expense indefinitely, to make decisions about his property, to treat him like an inconvenient guest in his own home. This is ridiculous, Christine finally managed to say. After everything we've done for you. And what exactly have you done for me, Christine? Besides occupying my house, using my resources, and making me feel like a burden in my own life. The silence that followed was deafening. Think about it, Charles continued, getting up to wash his cup. You have until the end of the month to decide whether you want to stay on my terms or look for another place. He left the kitchen feeling lighter than he had in years. The war had begun, and for the first time Charles wasn't unarmed. He's completely lost his mind. Christine's exalted voice traversed the thin walls of the house. 2 years taking care of him, and this is how he thanks us? Charles, sitting in his room with the door closed, could clearly hear the discussion between his son and daughter-in-law. It wasn't his intention to spy, but he also wouldn't make an effort not to hear. He's different, Chris. I've never heard him talk that way before. Marcus's voice sounded worried, almost frightened. Different how? Ungrateful? Selfish? No, more like determined, like he used to be when he worked. I remember him like that when I was a child. There was a pause, and Charles imagined Christine glaring at Marcus. Don't tell me you're considering paying rent to your own father. And what choice do we have? You know we can't rent anything decent with what I earn, much less buy. This is extortion, Marcus. He knows we're vulnerable, and he's taking advantage of that. The irony of the accusation almost made Charles laugh. For 2 years, who had been taking advantage of whom? Maybe we should try to talk to him, Marcus suggested. Explain our financial situation, reach an agreement. What agreement? He's clearly lost touch with reality. Maybe it's his age. Maybe we should consult a doctor, see if he's becoming, senile. Charles felt his blood boil. So that would be their strategy? Question his mental health because he finally decided to set boundaries. I don't think that's it, Chris. He seemed very lucid this morning. Then it's deliberate manipulation. He knows we have nowhere to go, and he's forcing us to accept his absurd conditions. Charles heard the sound of nervous footsteps, probably. Christine pacing back and forth. How much do we have saved? Asked Marcus. Almost nothing. Barely enough for the first month's rent in some decent place, much less deposit and everything else. What if we accepted his terms for now? We'd gain time to save, look for alternatives. I refuse to pay to live here. This house will be ours someday anyway. Charles closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. So that's what they thought? That they were just waiting to inherit the house? The house is his, Christine. He can do whatever he wants with it. Don't be naive, Marcus. Your father is 70 years old and has heart problems. How much time do you think he has left? 2 years? 5 at most? Is it worth getting into conflict with him for such a short time? The cold comment about his life expectancy hit Charles like a punch. He knew his relationship with Christine wasn't the best, but he never imagined she was counting the days until his death. Don't talk like that, Chris. He's my father. Your father who just threatened to evict us. We need to be practical. If he wants to play hardball, we can play too. What do you mean? We can make his life difficult enough that he gives up on this crazy idea. Or better yet, that he considers moving to that senior condominium he mentioned. Charles felt a chill. The woman was effectively proposing to make his life miserable to force him out of his own home. I'm not going to mistreat my father, Christine. Who said anything about mistreatment? Just making him realize he needs us more than he thinks. What if, I don't know, he started feeling more confused, forgetting where he left important things, maybe even getting scared by some small domestic accident? Are you suggesting we sabotage my father? Make him think he's losing his memory? I'm suggesting we help him realize he's no longer in a condition to live alone, for his own good. Charles felt nausea. The cynicism was so absolute it seemed unreal. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Be practical, Marcus. It's our house or the street. And frankly, after everything we've done for him, your father owes us this. Charles had heard enough. Picking up his cell phone, he sent a message to Richard. We need to accelerate the plan. Things here are worse than we thought. The response came almost immediately. Come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. I'll bring the real estate agent. That night during dinner, the silence was palpable. Marcus barely looked at his father, while Christine maintained a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. How was your day, Charles? She asked with artificial sweetness. Productive, he replied simply. That's good. You know, I've been thinking about our conversation this morning. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Charles watched as she pushed the food around her plate, rehearsing her next move. You're right that we should contribute more, she continued. After all, we're family, and families support each other. I completely agree. So, what do you think of instead of establishing a fixed rent amount, we simply split the expenses? Seems more familial, doesn't it? Charles saw through the maneuver. Without a fixed amount, it would be easier for them to minimize their contribution, claiming the expenses were less than they actually were. I prefer a fixed amount. It's clearer for everyone. Christine exchanged a quick glance with Marcus. And how much would that be? $1,200 per month plus grocery expenses. Christine almost choked on the water she was drinking. That's absurd. This neighborhood isn't worth half that. This neighborhood is worth exactly that, Christine. I did detailed research. In fact, I'm offering a considerable discount compared to the market value. But we're family. Yes, and family respects each other's boundaries. Family doesn't treat one of its members like a burden. Family doesn't plan to make an elderly person's life miserable to force them out of their own home. The silence that followed was deafening. Christine visibly paled, while Marcus looked from one to the other confused. What are you talking about? Marcus finally asked. The walls of this house are thin, son. They always have been. Understanding slowly dawned on Marcus's face, followed by shock and then shame. Dad, I don't. Charles interrupted gently. I don't blame you, Marcus. I blame myself for allowing this situation to continue for so long. But that ends now. Christine stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I won't stand for this. You can't treat us this way after everything we've done. For you. What exactly have you done for me, Christine? Besides treating me like an incompetent child in my own home? We gave up our independence to take care of you. No. You lost your apartment because you couldn't pay for it, and you came to live in my house because it was convenient. Let's be honest, at least once in these 2 years. Christine looked at Marcus, clearly expecting him to defend her. When he remained silent, his eyes fixed on his plate, she stormed out of the dining room. She didn't mean those things, she said. Dad, Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. About making your life difficult. She was just upset. I know your wife better than you think, son, and I know exactly what she meant. Charles got up from the table, collecting his plate. You have until the end of the month to decide. $1,200 rent plus groceries, or find somewhere else to live. As he left the dining room, he heard Marcus's soft voice behind him. I'm sorry, Dad. I really am. For the first time in 2 years, Charles believed him. The next morning, Charles met with Richard and the real estate agent, William Parker, at the lawyer's office. Based on the current market, your property is worth approximately $450,000, Mr. Ferreira, William explained, showing him comparable sales in the neighborhood. It's a prime location, and the house is in excellent condition. Charles felt a strange mixture of emotions. The house where he had lived with Helen for most of his life, where they had raised Marcus, where they had planned to grow old together. It had a monetary value that seemed simultaneously enormous and inadequate to represent all the memories it contained. And if I decided to sell, in this market, we could have serious offers within weeks, possibly even a bidding war, given the location. Charles looked at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. I'd like to list it, Charles said finally, but not immediately. I need some time to prepare. Of course, William replied. Just let me know when you're ready. After the real estate agent left, Richard looked at his friend with concern. Are you sure about this, Charles? Selling the house is a big step. I'm not completely sure yet, Charles admitted, but I want to have the option, and I want Marcus and Christine to understand the reality of their situation. Richard nodded, understanding the strategy. I've prepared the legal notification, he said, handing Charles an envelope. It clearly establishes you as the sole owner of the property, with exclusive right to make decisions about its use or sale. It also formally notifies them of the new rental terms, effective from the 1st of next month. Charles took the envelope, feeling its weight. Not physical, but symbolic. "This feels like the end of something," he said quietly. "No, my friend," Richard corrected. "It's the beginning of your new life." When Charles returned home, he found the house empty. It was Marcus's workday, and Christine had probably gone shopping or to her yoga class. The silence was refreshing. He walked through each room, really seeing his home for the first time in years. The living room, where Christine had replaced his and Helen's comfortable old furniture with modern pieces that looked stylish, but were uncomfortably to sit on. The kitchen, where his wife's carefully selected cookware had been pushed to the back of cabinets to make room for Christine's expensive gadgets. The office, now a home office, where Helen's desk had been relegated to a corner covered with Christine's fashion magazines. Even his bedroom hadn't escaped their influence, his closet space reduced to make room for out-of-season decorations and Lucas's old toys. This house was no longer his home. It was a space he was tolerated in, a building he financed but had no say in. Charles placed the legal notification on the dining table, prominently where they couldn't miss it. Then he went to his room and began the process he had been putting off, sorting through his belongings, deciding what was truly important to him. By the time he heard the front door open and Christine's voice calling for Lucas, Charles had filled 3 boxes with items he would take with him wherever he went next, and 2 boxes of things to donate. It felt liberating, this conscious letting go. "Dad?" Marcus's voice came from the hallway. "I'm here," Charles replied, stepping out of his room. Marcus stood there, the opened legal notification in his hand, his face a mixture of disbelief and resignation. "You're really going through with this?" "Yes. And if we can't afford it, then you'll need to find somewhere else to live." Charles said it calmly, without anger or triumph. It was simply a statement of fact. "This is fair," Charles completed the sentence. "This is fair, Marcus. For the first time in 2 years, this arrangement will be fair to everyone involved." Christine is furious. I expected she would be. She says we should contest this legally, that you're not in your right mind, that you're being influenced by someone. She's welcome to try. The documentation is quite clear. The house is mine, left to me by your mother. You were present when the will was read. Marcus sighed deeply, leaning against the wall. "I never meant for things to get this way, Dad." "I know, son, but they did. And now we need to deal with the consequences. What happens if we pay the rent? Can we stay?" "For now, yes. But I'm considering selling the house." The statement visibly shocked Marcus. "Selling? But where would you go?" "I've been looking at the Alameda condominium. They have very nice apartments, and the location is excellent." "But this is our family home." "This was our family home, Marcus. Your mother and I built it together, raised you here. But you left, built your own life. I stayed, alone after she died. And then you returned, not as my son coming home, but as someone taking over my space, my life, my autonomy." The honesty seemed to strike Marcus deeply. "I didn't see it that way." "I know. That's part of the problem." Christine's voice echoed up the stairs. "Marcus, are you going to talk to him or what?" Marcus looked torn, caught between his wife's demands and his father's quiet dignity. "I need to think about all this, Dad." "Take your time, son. You have until the end of the month to decide." The next 3 weeks passed in a strange atmosphere of cold politeness. Christine barely spoke to Charles, communicating through Marcus when absolutely necessary. Lucas, picking up on the tension, became quieter, spending more time in his room with his video games. Charles continued his methodical preparations, visiting the Alameda condominium twice more, meeting with the manager, viewing available apartments. He was particularly drawn to a corner unit on the 4th floor, with a balcony overlooking the park, and a second bedroom that could be converted into a study. "This unit will likely be snapped up quickly, Mr. Ferreira," the manager, Mrs. Reynolds, told him. "We have several interested parties." "I understand," Charles replied. "I'm just waiting for some financial matters to be resolved." What he didn't say was that he was waiting to see what Marcus would decide. Part of him still hoped for reconciliation, for his son to recognize the injustice of the past 2 years and make amends. But another part, the practical accountant who had spent decades analyzing numbers and probabilities, knew that the damage might be too deep, the patterns too established to change. 3 days before the end of the month, Marcus knocked on Charles's bedroom door late in the evening. "Dad, can we talk?" Charles was sitting in his armchair, reading one of Helen's favorite novels. "Of course, son. Come in." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, looking uncomfortable. "Christine and I have been talking. We've decided to find our own place." Charles felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief, sadness, vindication. "I see." "I'm sorry, Dad, for everything, for how we treated you, for taking advantage of your generosity, for making you feel like a stranger in your own home." The apology seemed genuine, and Charles felt some of the tension he'd been carrying for months begin to dissolve. "Thank you for saying that, Marcus. We found an apartment we can afford. It's small and in a less desirable neighborhood, but it's within our budget. We'll be moving out next weekend." "So soon?" "We thought it would be best. Make a clean break." Charles nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Christine couldn't bear to live under his rules, to be reminded daily that she had lost this power struggle. "Will you be selling the house?" Marcus asked after a moment of silence. "I'm still considering it. The apartment at Alameda is very nice, but this has been my home for so long. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that I respect it. It's your house, your decision." Those simple words, acknowledging his autonomy, his right to decide, his own future, meant more to Charles than Marcus could possibly understand. "Thank you, son." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the first comfortable moment between them in years. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Can we still visit? Lucas would miss you terribly." "Of course you can visit. You're my son. Lucas is my grandson. That will never change." Marcus seemed to relax slightly. "And maybe we could have dinner together sometimes, just you and me, to talk." Charles smiled, feeling a cautious hope. "I'd like that very much." The following weekend, Charles helped Marcus load the moving van. Christine supervised from a distance, still not speaking directly to Charles. Lucas seemed confused and upset by the whole situation. "Why can't we stay with Grandpa?" he kept asking. "Because grown-ups sometimes need their own space," Marcus tried to explain. "But we'll visit often, I promise." As the last box was loaded, Marcus turned to his father. "I guess that's everything." "Drive safely," Charles said, embracing his son awkwardly. "And call me when you're settled." "I will." Marcus hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry it had to end this way." "Not an ending," Charles corrected gently. "A new beginning, for all of us." As the van pulled away, with Christine's car following behind, Charles stood in the driveway watching until they disappeared around the corner. The house felt eerily quiet when he went back inside. For the first time in 2 years, he was truly alone. He walked from room to room, taking in the subtle changes, the spaces where furniture had been, the faded patches on walls where pictures had hung, the lingering scent of Christine's perfume that would eventually fade. It was strange to feel both empty and liberated at the same time. Charles fixed himself a simple dinner and ate at the kitchen table, not in his room, as had become his habit. He played some of Helen's favorite music at the volume he preferred. He sat in the living room and read without being interrupted or made to feel that he was in the way. It was his house again, but it didn't feel quite like home anymore. The next morning, Charles called William. "Parker, I'd like to list the house," he said. "I've made my decision." "Excellent, Mr. Ferreira. I can come by this afternoon to take photographs and measurements." "That would be fine." Charles spent the morning tidying up, removing the last traces of Marcus and Christine's presence. It was a bittersweet task. Coming across Lucas's drawings tucked away in drawers, finding a photo of Marcus that had slipped behind the bookcase, discovering one of Helen's scarves that Christine had apparently used and then discarded. Each item was a memory, a fragment of his life's story. When William arrived, Charles was ready. He followed the real estate agent through the house, answering questions about renovations, the age of appliances, property boundaries. It felt strangely like a final interview, summarizing his decades in this house in terms of square footage and market value. The market is very hot right now, Mr. Ferreira. Properties in this neighborhood are selling within days, often above asking price. What would you recommend as a listing price? Given the condition and location, I'd suggest $475,000. It might seem aggressive, but it gives us room to negotiate while still achieving our target. Nearly $500,000 for the house he and Helen had purchased for $95,000 30 years ago. The numbers seemed almost abstract. List it, Charles said, and let me know as soon as there's interest. Within 3 days, William called with news. Mr. Ferreira, we've received 5 offers already. 2 are above asking price. Charles felt a rush of conflicting emotions. What's the highest offer? $493,000 from a young family. The husband is a doctor at Memorial Hospital. The wife is a teacher. They have 2 children, ages 5 and 7. A family, like they once were. Perhaps this house needed a family again, needed to be filled with the noise and energy of children, with new memories being created within its walls. I accept their offer, Charles said without hesitation. Are you sure? We could potentially create a bidding war, push the price even higher. I'm sure the house deserves a family. The closing process moved quickly. The young couple, David and Sarah Matthews, seemed eager to move in before the school year started for their children. During the final walkthrough, Charles met them briefly. Sarah had Helen's warm smile, and their daughter Emma reminded him of Marcus at that age. Curious, touching everything, asking endless questions. We'll take good care of your home, Mr. Ferreira, David assured him, shaking his hand firmly. I know you will, Charles replied. It's your home now. The day before closing, Charles visited the Alameda condominium and signed the purchase agreement for the corner unit on the 4th floor. The transaction was remarkably simple. His house had appreciated so much that he could buy the condominium outright and still have substantial savings left over. Welcome to Alameda, Mr. Ferreira, Mrs. Reynolds said, handing him the keys. I think you'll be very happy here. That evening, Charles sat on the floor of his empty bedroom, surrounded by the few boxes he would take with him. Helen's photo looked up at him from one of the boxes. We had a good life here, didn't we? He whispered to her image. But it's time for a new chapter. He slept on a mattress on the floor that night, his last in the house they had shared. 1:00. The morning, the movers arrived promptly at 8:01. By noon, his few possessions were loaded and on their way to his new home. Charles walked through the empty house one last time, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. In each room, memories flooded back. Marcus taking his first steps in the living room, Helen cooking Sunday dinners in the kitchen, family, game nights around the dining table, quiet evenings reading together in the den. He said goodbye to each room, not with sadness, but with gratitude for all they had witnessed. At the closing, Charles signed the final documents with a steady hand. When the attorney handed him the check, his equity minus the condominium purchase, it represented not just money, but freedom. Freedom to live his remaining years on his own terms. The young couple was there too, barely containing their excitement. The keys are yours, Charles said, sliding them across the table. May you be as happy there as we were. Thank you, Mr. Ferreira, Sarah said, her eyes bright with emotion, for trusting us with your home. It's your home now, he corrected, gently. Take care of it, and it will take care of you. As Charles walked out of the attorney's office, he felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of the past, of loss, of being diminished in his own home, of fighting for his dignity, seemed to fall away with each step. His new life was waiting. The Alameda condominium exceeded his expectations. His apartment was flooded with natural light, the balcony offering a perfect view of the park. The building had amenities he hadn't even considered. A small library, a fitness center designed for seniors, a community room where residents gathered for coffee each morning. Within days, he had met more neighbors than he had in years at his old house. There was Arthur, a retired professor who shared his love of history books, Elena, a widow who organized weekly bridge games, Frank and Richard, a couple who had been together for 40 years and knew all the best restaurants in the area. For the first time since Helen's death, Charles felt like he was part of a community again. He arranged his belongings carefully in the new space, giving Helen's photo pride of place on the mantel. The second bedroom became the study he had always wanted, with a comfortable reading chair by the window and bookshelves lining the walls. It was smaller than his old house, but every inch of it was his, reflecting his tastes, his needs, his life. A month after moving, Charles invited Marcus and Lucas for dinner. Christine had other commitments, which was fine with Charles. He prepared Helen's famous lasagna, set the table with care, and waited nervously for their arrival. When the doorbell rang, he found not just Marcus and Lucas, but also a beautifully wrapped gift. A housewarming present, Marcus explained as they entered. Lucas picked it out. The boy bounced excitedly as Charles unwrapped the package to find a digital photo frame. "It has all our family pictures," Lucas exclaimed. "Dad helped me scan them. Look, there's even ones with Grandma." Charles scrolled through the images: Helen on their wedding day, Marcus as a baby, family vacations, holidays, ordinary moments, captured and preserved. The last photo was recent: Charles, Marcus, and Lucas at the park near the condominium, taken just a week earlier. "This is wonderful," Charles said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you both so much." During dinner, Charles noticed how different Marcus seemed. More relaxed, more attentive, more like the son he remembered before the tension of living together had strained their relationship. "How's the new apartment?" Charles asked as they enjoyed dessert. "Small," Marcus admitted, "but it's ours. Christine has started freelancing again to help with expenses, and Lucas is adjusting well to his new school. And you?" "It's been a wake-up call, honestly. I never realized how much we relied on you, how little responsibility we were taking for our own lives." The admission wasn't accusatory or bitter, just a simple statement of fact. "Sometimes we need to fall before we can learn to stand properly," Charles offered. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Dad, I want to apologize again. For everything. For how we treated you. For taking you for granted. For not seeing what we were doing to you. It's in the past now, son. We're both moving forward." After dinner, while Lucas explored the condominium's game room with another resident's grandson, Marcus and Charles sat on the balcony with coffee. "You seem happy here," Marcus observed. "I am. Happier than I've been in a long time. I was worried about you being alone. I'm not alone. I have neighbors, new friends, activities, and I have you and Lucas visiting." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sunset over the park. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Thank you for forcing us to grow up. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." Charles smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with triumph or vindication. Just the quiet knowledge that sometimes the most difficult decisions are also the most right. That's what parents do, Marcus, even when their children are grown. When they said goodbye that evening, Marcus hugged his father tightly. "We'll come again next weekend if that's okay. Lucas wants to use the pool. Anytime, son. This is your home too. Not to live in, but to visit, to be welcome, to be family." 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, Charles sat with Elena and Arthur at their regular table in the condominium's cafe. They were discussing plans for the community garden when Charles's phone rang. It was Richard Mendez. "Charles, how are you enjoying life at Alameda?" "It's wonderful, Richard. Best decision I ever made." "I thought you might say that. Listen, I have a potential client in a situation very similar to what you experienced. Older gentleman, son and daughter-in-law living with him, feeling increasingly marginalized in his own home. I was wondering if you might be willing to talk with him. Share your experience, how you handled it." Charles thought about the journey he had taken from invisible man in his own home to the confident, engaged person he was now. "I'd be happy to," he said. "Sometimes we just need to know that we're not alone. that there's a way forward. Excellent. His name is Thomas. I'll arrange a meeting. As he hung up, Charles realized how far he had come. From victim to mentor, from pushed aside to centered, from surviving to thriving. Good news? Elena asked, noting his smile. Just an opportunity to pay it forward, Charles replied. He looked around at the sunlit cafe, at his new friends, at the life he had created for himself. Helen would be proud, he thought, not just of the changes he had made, but of the dignity with which he had made them. At 71, Charles Ferreira had learned perhaps the most important lesson of his life. It's never too late to reclaim your space in the world.